I sat there quietly spooning mashed potatoes onto my plate when she said it. Technician, really? That's what you've done with your life? I didn't expect it, but I could feel my blood boiling before she even finished her sentence. She'd always been the golden child, the one who never needed to try. But me? I worked hard, every day, and when I saw the smug look on her face, something inside me snapped. So I made a decision, one that would change everything. I canceled her tuition, her dream program. The screams that followed, let's just say they were only the beginning. Before we continue, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I honestly love reading each one. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, enjoy the story. I'm Jane, 42, living in a small town not far from Nashville, Tennessee. The place I call home isn't anything fancy, but I've learned to love it. I work as a technician at a small but reputable repair shop. Nothing glamorous, nothing special. But I'm good at what I do, better than most. I can fix almost anything, computers, phones, appliances, name it, I've done it. But, of course, no one in my family really understands. You know how it is. You have that one relative who always has something to say. For me, it's my sister, Claire, a couple of years older and always perfect. She's a lawyer, successful, confident, everything I'm not. She never lets me forget it. Thanksgiving was no different. The house smelled like turkey, pumpkin pie, and the awkward tension that always seemed to hang in the air when Claire came over. I hadn't seen her in months, and even though we were family, it always felt like I was on the outside looking in. The table was set, and everyone gathered around, talking about their lives. People shared updates about jobs, kids, whatever. And then, out of nowhere, Claire's voice cut through the noise. "So Jane, how's your little repair shop going? You still fixing toasters and phones for a living?" She leaned back in her chair, smug smile plastered on her face. I froze, the spoon in my hand halfway to my plate. She said it like I was a joke, like I was some sort of failure. My hand tightened around the spoon. "Yes, Claire, I'm still doing just that," I said, forcing a smile. "You know, there's a lot of people who need their toasters fixed, especially around the holidays." But she wasn't done. "I just don't get it. You could have done so much more with your life, Jane. Why stay stuck in some small town doing that?" Her words stung, sharper than any of the knives on the table. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I tried to shrug it off, but my hands were shaking now. I wanted to fight back, to say something cutting, but I just kept quiet. Until it got worse. "Mom always said you'd end up doing this," Claire continued, her voice dripping with that condescending tone I hated. "I mean, let's be real. You were never going to be the one to climb the corporate ladder, were you?" The words were like a punch to the gut. I looked around the table, but nobody was saying anything. Not even Mom, who just sat there quietly, pushing her peas around on her plate. But then something inside me snapped. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. "You're right, Claire," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "I never climbed any ladder, but at least I'm not looking down on my sister, making her feel like crap for doing what makes her happy." Claire raised an eyebrow, almost amused. "Is that your big comeback?" "I'm just trying to help, you know. Maybe if you had a little ambition—" "Enough, Claire," I shot back, my voice a little louder than I meant. "Maybe it's time you learn to respect people for the work they do, not just the paycheck they pull in." And that's when the real damage happened. I looked her dead in the eye, and in a moment of pure, unfiltered anger, I made a decision. "You want to mock me? Fine. But you've got something important coming up, don't you? You've been talking about that law school program for months. Well, guess what? I just canceled your tuition." She froze, her jaw hanging open, eyes wide. The room went silent. I could almost hear the blood rushing in my ears. What?" Claire whispered, her voice shaking. "Yep, I called the school, got all the paperwork done, and canceled your application. You're not going." I felt a small sense of satisfaction in my chest, but it didn't last. Her face twisted in anger. "You did what?" She stood up, slamming her hands on the table. "You can't—" "I just did," I said, crossing my arms over my chest. "Maybe you should think before you speak next time?" The silence in the room was suffocating. The clink of silverware against plates, the soft hum of the oven in the background. all of it disappeared, leaving only Claire's stunned face and my own heartbeat. It was like the world had stopped for a split second, and I couldn't quite figure out if I'd just made a huge mistake or if I had finally done something that had been building up for years. Claire's eyes narrowed, the color draining from her face. "You didn't just do that," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Oh, I did," I said, my tone steady, almost cold. "And don't try to pretend you're not mad because you can't control everything for once." The rest of the table was still. No one spoke. It was like they were afraid to breathe, watching this unfold. Mom didn't even look at me. She just stared down at her plate, as if wishing she could disappear. My dad shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't say anything. I wasn't surprised. It had always been like this. Claire had the power to make everyone else fall in line with her, to bend to her will. But not anymore, not this time. You can't do that," Claire repeated, her voice rising now, cracking with anger. "That's my future, my career. You ruined it." "You ruined it the moment you decided to mock me, Claire," I said, holding her gaze. "I worked hard to get where I am, and I won't let anyone, especially you, disrespect that. You can't just talk down to people and expect no consequences." Claire opened her mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. Instead, she turned to our parents, a wild, desperate look in her eyes. "Mom, Dad, tell her she can't do this. Tell her she's being ridiculous." Mom finally lifted her gaze, but it wasn't in my favor. She sighed and shook her head. "Jane, I think you've gone too far. This isn't how we handle things in this family." I bit my lip, feeling the heat rise in my chest, but I didn't back down. "Maybe this is how it should be handled, Mom. Maybe it's time someone finally taught Claire a lesson." Dad rubbed his temples and looked between the two of us. "I don't know what's going on here, but this is Thanksgiving, not the time for a fight." "Fine," Claire spat. "Let's make it official then. I'll go through every last lawyer I know, and I will make sure you regret this. You'll pay for this, Jane." I couldn't help it. I laughed. It wasn't a funny laugh, but a bitter, sharp one that made my chest tighten. "Go ahead, Claire. You think your lawyer friends can fix everything? You think they can undo what you just said to me?" "You think I'm scared of you?" she hissed, hands balled into fists. "You've always been pathetic, Jane, always playing the victim." I could feel the anger bubbling in my stomach, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm not the victim here, Claire. You are. You've lived your life on top of everyone else's heads, thinking you're better than them. Well, I'm not your stepping stone anymore." She took a step toward me, her face red, her fists shaking. "I'll destroy you." The words hit like a slap, and for a moment I almost felt guilty. Almost. But then I remembered all the years of her throwing her success in my face, all the little jabs at my career, at my life, at everything I had worked for. She was right about one thing, though. This was personal now, and there was no going back. The room was so quiet, you could hear the crackling of the fireplace in the corner. It wasn't just the silence from shock. It was the kind of silence that happens when the emotional stakes have been raised to the point of no return. "I'm sorry, but I'm not scared of you anymore," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'm not going to be scared of you anymore." Claire blinked, almost like she was seeing me for the first time. The anger was still there, but now there was confusion, a crack in her perfect armor. I don't get you," she whispered, as if that was the real insult. "I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family." I shook my head. "You never understood me, Claire. You never tried, and I don't need your approval anymore." The tears started to come, not for me, but for her. It wasn't the satisfaction I thought I'd feel. It was just sadness. Deep, heavy sadness. I had made a choice that would destroy something between us forever. But in that moment, I knew it was something I had to do. The rest of dinner went by in a blur. I don't remember much of it, honestly. The sounds of silverware and murmurs of conversation felt distant. All I could focus on was Claire, her flushed face, her wide eyes as she tried to gather herself. She kept muttering under her breath, as if trying to convince herself that what had just happened wasn't real. But I knew it was. I could feel the weight of the decision hanging in the air, pressing down on both of us. After dessert, everyone trickled out of the dining room. but Claire stayed behind, staring at me across the table. Her fingers drummed softly against her wine glass. I could feel the tension in the air like a storm on the horizon, just waiting to break. "Jane," she said, her voice quiet and controlled now. Not the rage from earlier, but something colder, more calculated. "You don't realize what you've done, do you?" I met her gaze without flinching. "I realize exactly what I've done." She smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was sharp, like a knife being drawn from its sheath. "You've ruined everything. Do you think this will just go away? That I'll forgive you for this? You've messed with the wrong person." I leaned forward, matching her intensity. "Maybe you're the one who needs to take a good, long look in the mirror, Claire. You've been using people your whole life. Me, Mom, Dad, all of us. You think you're the queen of this family? But I'm done being your pawn. I'm done staying in the background while you try to control everything." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, thick with years of resentment, years of Claire's constant need to prove she was better than everyone else. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "You don't get it," Claire said, her voice low. "You've taken something from me that I can never get back. My future, my career, everything I've worked for." "I didn't take it from you," I replied. "You lost it the moment you decided to treat people like they were beneath you. You lost it the moment you mocked me in front of everyone." Her hand clenched into a fist, but she held it back, as if unsure whether to lash out physically or with words. "I'll make sure you pay for this, Jane," she said, a dangerous glint in her eyes. "You'll regret this." I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried anymore. I had done what I needed to do, and no matter what she threw at me, I wouldn't budge. The night dragged on, but I could feel the distance growing between us. It wasn't just the physical space at the table. It was something deeper, something irreversible. The gap between us, once small and manageable, had grown into an impassable chasm. But then, just as I was about to leave the room, she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "You really think you're better than me now? Just because you took something from me?" I turned to face her, and for the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. Not the usual arrogance, but something darker. Vulnerability. Fear. "I don't think I'm better than you, Claire," I said, my voice steady. "I just think I'm finally seeing you for who you really are." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out, my heels clicking sharply against the floor. I didn't need to hear her final retort. The damage had been done. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Claire didn't speak to me. She didn't respond to my calls or texts. And every time I tried to ask Mom or Dad how she was doing, they acted like nothing had happened. That's what hurt the most. They acted like I had done something unforgivable, like I was the one who had crossed a line. But I knew the truth. Claire had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. And I was just the screw-up, the one who never measured up. Until now. I didn't care about Claire's silence. What mattered was that I had finally made a stand. But what I didn't expect was how her revenge would come. A week after Thanksgiving, I received a letter from her lawyer. I opened it slowly, heart thudding in my chest. The letter wasn't long, but it was enough to send a chill down my spine. She was suing me. Sue me. My sister, the one I had always tried to protect, was now using the same legal system that had helped her climb the social ladder to tear me apart. I read the words again, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. She was accusing me of deliberate harm, of interfering with her education and future career. She was demanding compensation for the emotional distress and damages caused by my actions. I could feel the familiar rush of panic building in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe. She had done this to hurt me, to break me down. But she wasn't going to win, not this time. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening sky. The snow was starting to fall, soft and steady, covering the world in a blanket of white. It almost felt peaceful, but I knew the storm wasn't over, not by a long shot. The letter from Claire's lawyer sat on my kitchen table like a weight I couldn't shake. I stared at it for hours, reading the same paragraphs over and over. It didn't matter how many times I read it. The words still felt like a punch in the gut. The way she described the situation painted me as some villain, someone who maliciously ruined her life. But here's the thing. Claire's always been good at twisting the truth to suit her narrative. And now I realized it wasn't just about the tuition, it was about control. She had always used her position in the family, in life, to make sure everyone else stayed in their place. And I had just taken away her control. She wasn't used to that. I couldn't let her win, not after everything I'd been through, watching her get everything handed to her while I worked my ass off just to be seen as equal. The first thing I did was pick up the phone. I didn't even hesitate. It was time to get a lawyer of my own. A week later, I sat across from an older man named Greg at a local law office. He was gruff, a little scruffy, but he had an air of confidence that made me feel like I wasn't going into this fight alone. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "your sister's got herself a real mess here, but I'm guessing you didn't do this on a whim, right?" I took a deep breath and nodded. I didn't. She's been mocking me for years, Greg. And not just me, everyone in the family. It's like she's got this idea that she's above us all. I snapped. And now she's trying to make it sound like I'm the bad guy. Greg studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing. "Well, that's the first thing we'll need to do. Show that this was more than a one-time thing, that there's a pattern here. But Jane, I've got to ask, are you ready for what's coming? A lawsuit like this isn't just going to be a few court dates and then done. This will get messy." I nodded without hesitation. "I've been dealing with her for years. I'm ready." Greg gave me a small smile like he appreciated my determination. "All right then, let's get to work." The next few weeks were a blur. I didn't expect things to move quickly, but I also didn't realize just how deep this would go. It wasn't just about the tuition anymore. Claire was pulling out all the stops. She brought up everything from childhood arguments to things that had happened years ago, anything she could use to paint me as the villain. But the more she fought, the clearer it became that she wasn't just trying to get me to back down. She was trying to break me. And every time I thought about backing out, I reminded myself of the years of insults, the way she'd always belittled me, the way she assumed everyone else's life had to revolve around hers. One day I got a call from Greg. "Jane," he said, his voice serious, "we've got some new information on Claire's side. She's planning to file for damages for emotional distress. She's pushing for more than just tuition reimbursement." I felt a knot form in my stomach. "What are we looking at here?" $500,000 at least," Greg said flatly. "She's trying to claim that your actions caused her emotional trauma, and she wants compensation for it. She's really digging in." I felt a mix of disbelief and anger. $500,000 over something like this? Greg sighed. "People do strange things when they feel like they've lost control. And Claire, she's a master manipulator. If we go to court, this could get ugly." Ugly. That was an understatement. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was turning into an all-out war. I could already feel the strain creeping into every part of my life. Work was harder to focus on, I wasn't sleeping well, and even when I tried to talk to my parents, they just didn't get it. They acted like I was the one who had ruined everything, like I was the one who had overreacted. But I wasn't going to back down, not now. 2 weeks later, we had our first mediation session. It was supposed to be a quick meeting to settle things, avoid a long, drawn-out trial, but I knew Claire wasn't going to settle for anything less than complete victory. I could see it in her eyes when she walked into the room, her lawyer right behind her, dressed to the nines in that way that screamed, "I'm untouchable." Her eyes flicked to me, and for the first time, there was no condescension, no mockery. Instead, there was something else, something I hadn't seen in years: fear. Her lawyer spoke first, his voice smooth and confident. "We're here today to discuss a fair resolution for my client, Ms. Claire." He turned to me. "Ms. Jane, we understand that emotions can run high in family matters, but the fact remains that Ms. Claire has suffered significant distress as a result of your actions." I couldn't help but scoff. Significant distress? I've been dealing with her belittling me for years. Who do you think I am? I didn't just wake up one day and decide to ruin her life. Greg leaned in, his tone sharp. "My client is more than willing to settle, but we're not going to be bullied into a settlement that doesn't reflect the truth. If Ms. Claire insists on taking this to court, We will fight back with everything we've got. Claire's lawyer hesitated for a moment, clearly surprised by our response. Perhaps we can discuss this further, he said, his tone less certain now. But it was clear what was happening. Claire was starting to lose control. She had expected me to cave, to back down, to apologize, but I wasn't going to, not anymore. She stood up abruptly, slamming her hands on the table. You think you can just destroy my future and get away with it? Her voice was shaking with fury, but there was a crack in it now. A crack I hadn't seen before. I didn't destroy your future, Claire, I said, my voice steady but cold. You did that yourself. You've spent your whole life thinking you were above everyone, and now you're trying to use the system to get what you want. You've lost control, and it's your own fault. For a moment, she just stood there, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. I saw her glance at her lawyer, who was clearly at a loss for what to do next. Then she turned and walked out of the room without another word. It wasn't over yet. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach as I left the mediation session. Claire had stormed off, but I knew that wasn't the end. Not by a long shot. She was going to escalate things. She always did. But now it was clear that I had something she didn't expect. A backbone. And for the first time, I felt like I was in control. The following days were a blur of meetings, phone calls, and emails. Greg, my lawyer, kept me in the loop, and I could hear the satisfaction in his voice every time he gave me an update. She's losing ground, he said after one of our calls. She's trying to build a case, but the more we dig, the less solid her foundation becomes. That felt good to hear, but the satisfaction was fleeting. Every time I saw the look in my parents' eyes when they talked to me about the case, it was like they were still on Claire's side. They'd listened to me, but there was a quiet judgment in their silence, like they were waiting for me to be the one to back down first. And then just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got a call from work. Jane, there's been an issue, my boss Lisa said. I'm afraid we need to discuss something urgent. Can you come in this afternoon? I could hear the edge in her voice and my stomach churned. I'd been working as a technician at a local hospital for over 10 years. It was a solid job, reliable, but I knew that at any moment, something could happen. And today, it seemed like it was that moment. When I got to work, Lisa was waiting for me in her office. The door was closed and her face was tight, as if she had been waiting for this conversation for a long time. Jane, she began, we've had some complaints about your recent behavior. Specifically, there's been some concern about your professionalism with patients. I blinked, trying to process her words. What are you talking about? I've been doing my job just like always. Lisa sighed, her eyes narrowing. I'm afraid there have been some reports from your coworkers about your attitude. You've been distracted lately, and that's starting to affect patient care. I felt my chest tighten. My mind immediately flashed back to everything I'd been juggling. The lawsuit, the constant stress of dealing with Claire's attacks. I hadn't realized how much it was affecting me at work, but it made sense now. I'd been slipping. I hadn't been giving my all. I wasn't sure how to respond, but I knew I couldn't lose my job, not when everything else was falling apart. I'm sorry, I said quickly. I've been dealing with some personal stuff, but I'll make sure it doesn't affect my work again. Lisa didn't look convinced. You need to take some time and get this sorted out, Jane. You can't afford to let it go on any longer. We're going to put you on probation for the next month. If things don't improve, we'll have to reconsider your position here. I nodded, even though I was seething inside. The last thing I needed was more pressure, more people judging me. But I didn't have a choice. Losing my job would only make things worse. By the time I got home, the weight of everything was starting to crush me. Claire's lawsuit, my job hanging by a thread, my parents' quiet disappointment. It all felt like too much. I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. For a moment, I thought about just giving up, letting it all go. But then the phone rang. It was Greg. Jane, he said urgently, I've got some new info. We've been digging into Claire's financials. It seems she's been hiding some things, major things. I sat up, suddenly alert. What do you mean? What kind of things? Things like credit card debts, unreported income, and some questionable transactions that don't line up with her story. She's been using the system to cover up her mistakes for years. We're not just dealing with a simple case of emotional distress here. This is bigger. I could hear the smile in Greg's voice, but I wasn't smiling. This was the break I needed, but it wasn't going to be easy. Claire was going to fight back harder than ever now. I need you to stay calm, Greg continued. We're going to use this to counter her claims, but it's going to get messy. Are you prepared for what's coming? I didn't even hesitate. I'm ready, let's do it. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. Greg and I combed through Claire's finances, piecing together her web of lies. It was like watching a master manipulator slowly unravel. But as much as I felt satisfaction in uncovering her deceit, it didn't bring me peace. Every time I saw her name on my phone, every time I had to face her at a meeting, it felt like I was stepping into a battle I couldn't avoid. Claire wasn't going to let this go easily, and I knew it. But I was tired of being afraid, tired of letting her control everything. This was my chance to fight back, to stand up for myself in a way I had never done before. One night, after hours of working through legal documents, I took a deep breath and called my parents. Mom, Dad, I began, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to hurt anyone. I did it because Claire has been hurting all of us for years, and I can't let her get away with it anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, finally, my mom spoke. Jane, we don't want to choose sides, but you're our daughter and we love you. Whatever happens, we're here for you. It wasn't the overwhelming support I had hoped for, but it was enough to give me the strength to keep going. Claire was right about one thing. This wasn't going to be easy, but I was done backing down. It was getting harder to breathe. The weight of everything, the lawsuit, my job on the line, my family's divided loyalties, felt like it was pressing in from all sides. But the last straw, the moment when I knew there was no going back, came on a quiet Thursday afternoon. I had just returned from work, exhausted after a long shift, when I saw a familiar name on my phone screen. It was Claire. I didn't know why I even bothered answering anymore. What did she think I was going to do? Apologize? Cower? After everything she'd done? But I answered anyway. Hello? My voice sounded tight, but I couldn't help it. Jane. Claire's voice was ice cold, like it always was when she wanted something. We need to talk. I'm tired of playing games. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I didn't back down. I'm listening. You've really gone too far this time, she spat. You think this is just about the tuition? You think I'm some spoiled brat, but I've worked hard for everything I have. You have no right to take that from me. I gritted my teeth. Claire, you've never worked a day in your life without someone else cleaning up your mess. You want to talk about what's fair? Fine, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how you've been manipulating everyone around you, including me, for years. I've had enough. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Claire's voice came back, lower now, almost threatening. You think you can win this? You think you're some hero for standing up to me? Well, Jane, let me tell you something. When this is over, I'm going to make sure you regret this. I'll destroy you. I'll ruin everything you've worked for. You'll never have a peaceful day again. My hands shook, but I clenched them into fists, holding my ground. You've tried to control me for years, but you're not doing it anymore. I'm done letting you tear me down. Her response was sharp, cutting, full of venom. You'll see. You'll see just how far I'm willing to go. You won't win, Jane. You can't beat me. The call ended abruptly, leaving the room thick with tension. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the screen, as the last of her words echoed in my mind. I knew she wouldn't stop until she'd done everything in her power to break me. But this time, I wasn't going to let her. I had something she didn't, a will to fight. And this fight was far from over. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings and preparation. Greg and I were working overtime, pulling together every piece of evidence we could find. We were going to take Claire down, not just for the tuition, but for everything she'd done to us all. I knew I couldn't afford to be distracted by what Claire said or did. But when the weekend rolled around and I saw that she'd posted a video on social media, talking about how devastated she was by my actions, how heartbroken she was to have a sister like me, I almost lost it. I stared at the screen, watching as she cried on camera, telling everyone how I had betrayed her. The comments poured in, one after the other, people saying how cruel I was, how I had ruined her future. I felt the anger surge inside me, hot and furious, but then I remembered. Claire had always used manipulation and lies to control people. It was her weapon of choice, and now it was mine too. I called Greg. We need to release everything. We can't let her control the narrative anymore. He didn't hesitate. I've got just the thing. We're going to take the media by storm. Let's expose her once and for all. The media blitz began the next day. Greg had connections, and within hours we had reporters knocking on Claire's door, asking about the discrepancies in her financial records, the debts she'd been hiding, the lavish lifestyle she'd been living while pretending to be the victim. The truth started to pour out, every lie, every secret she'd kept hidden. The spotlight shifted from me to her, and I could feel the tension finally begin to ease. But that wasn't enough. Not yet. We were going to take this all the way. Greg and I filed a countersuit, showing how Claire had defrauded her way through life, how she had manipulated not just me, but a whole network of people into giving her what she wanted. The lawsuit wasn't about the tuition anymore. It was about something far bigger. By the time we went to court a few weeks later, the atmosphere was electric. Every day felt like an uphill battle, but I knew I was on the right side of things. The tension was thick, and I could tell that Claire knew she was losing. We walked into the courtroom, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the underdog. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Greg began, his voice steady, "we're here today because of the reckless actions of Ms. Claire. She has manipulated this entire family for years, pretending to be a victim while hiding the truth. We're here to expose those lies, to hold her accountable for the years of harm she has caused." I glanced at Claire, sitting across from me at the defendant's table. Her face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She was trying to hold it together, but the cracks were showing. Then it was Claire's turn to speak. She stood up, her voice shaky as she tried to recount how she had been wronged by me. But every word she said felt hollow, like a last-ditch attempt to salvage something she couldn't save. I could see it in her eyes, the fear, the realization that the walls were closing in. The trial lasted for days, but as the evidence mounted against her, I could feel the tide turning. One by one, the witnesses testified. The financial records, the emails, the social media posts, everything we had uncovered was laid bare. There was nowhere for Claire to hide anymore. The final day of the trial arrived. We sat in the courtroom, waiting for the verdict. My heart raced, but I kept telling myself that no matter what happened, I had already won. I had taken back control. When the jury came back, the judge stood, his voice booming. "We find the defendant, Ms. Claire, guilty of fraud, emotional distress, and manipulation. She is ordered to pay restitution to the plaintiff, Ms. Jane, and all legal fees associated with this case." It felt surreal. For a moment, I didn't know if I should cry, laugh, or scream. But in the end, all I could do was sit there, my hands trembling as the weight of it all sank in. I walked out of the courtroom that day a different person. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in years, I felt free. I had gotten my revenge, not just on Claire, but on the years of her control, the years of her making me feel small. And I knew this victory wasn't just about money or lawsuits. It was about taking back what was mine, my dignity, my peace. As for Claire, she had been silenced, finally. And me, I was just getting started. The days that followed were a strange kind of limbo. It felt like the world had shifted, but nothing quite felt settled. I had won the case, finally, but the victory tasted a little bitter. Sure, Claire was humiliated, and the truth had been exposed, but there was still a part of me that couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. Was it worth it? The phone calls started coming in from old friends, family members. Most of them had been silent during the entire ordeal, but now they all had something to say. Some were supportive. Others were more cautious, their voices filled with hesitation. "I can't believe she did that to you," one friend said. "You really did the right thing." But even those words couldn't shake the hollow feeling that lingered. I spent a lot of time in the weeks following the trial reflecting. I couldn't help but think back to everything Claire and I had been through. Growing up, we had been close, even if she was always the more dominant one. She had a way of making everything her own, whether it was friends, our parents' attention, or the family business. It felt like I spent my whole life walking in her shadow, waiting for her approval. But that was over now. One afternoon, after another round of phone calls with lawyers and my parents, who still seemed unable to fully support me, I received an unexpected knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so when I opened it, I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was Claire. I froze. I hadn't seen her in weeks, not since the trial. The sight of her standing there, her face pale and drawn, sent a shiver down my spine. But I didn't let myself back down. I stood my ground. She looked at me, her eyes red from what seemed like crying. "Jane," her voice was low, hesitant. "Can we talk?" I wanted to slam the door in her face to tell her to get lost, but something in her expression stopped me. Was it guilt? Regret? Or was it another one of her manipulative tactics? I couldn't tell. "What do you want, Claire?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I've been thinking," she began, her words careful, as if choosing them one by one. "About everything, about the lawsuit, about how I treated you. I was wrong." I didn't respond immediately. Part of me wanted to believe her, but I had learned the hard way that Claire's apologies were often just another play to get what she wanted. I crossed my arms, trying not to show how much I was still hurting. "You were wrong, Claire," I said, my voice cold, "but it's too late for apologies now." "I know," she whispered. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted to say it. For once." The silence between us stretched out, thick with unspoken words. Claire had always been able to twist things to her advantage, but now she seemed different. We were no longer two sisters fighting for control. We were strangers, each scarred by the past in our own way. Finally I spoke, my voice low. "I can't forget what you did to me, to this family, but maybe one day I'll understand why." Claire didn't answer. Instead, she just nodded and turned to leave. I didn't stop her. Part of me wanted to, but I knew that even if we had been close at one time, that relationship was gone. There was no going back. The next few days passed in a blur. I focused on work, on regaining my stability. But every time I saw Claire's face on social media or heard someone mention her, it was like I was pulled right back into that dark place. It wasn't that I wanted revenge anymore. What I wanted was peace. I had gotten that to some extent with the lawsuit, but the emotional toll it had taken was something I couldn't shake. Greg kept in touch, providing updates on Claire's financial situation. She wasn't doing well. The restitution she had been ordered to pay was substantial, and I knew she wouldn't be able to keep up with it for long. For once, I felt like the balance of power had shifted, but I wasn't gloating. It was strange, almost surreal, to realize that what I had really been fighting for all along wasn't revenge. It was justice. And that had always been my mistake. Thinking justice would come quickly, that it would heal everything. It didn't. It just gave me the space to heal. Then out of nowhere, I received a letter from Claire. A real letter, not an email or a message on social media, but a handwritten one, sealed with her unmistakable handwriting. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. What more could she possibly want from me? But when I finally read the letter, my heart sank. "Jane," it began, "I know this isn't enough to undo everything I've done, but I need you to know that I am sorry. I've been selfish, I've been cruel, and I've hurt you more than anyone ever should. I've lost so much, and it's my fault. I can't fix it, but I want to try. Please know that I don't expect anything from you, not forgiveness, not your love, just your understanding." I folded the letter and put it down on the table. I didn't know what to think. Was this sincere? Was this just another attempt to manipulate me? But in that moment, I realized something. It didn't matter. Claire's apology didn't change anything. The damage had already been done. I didn't need her approval anymore. I had already started rebuilding my life. The rest of that year passed in a blur. I focused on healing, on finding peace. I started volunteering at the hospital again, working with patients who needed me. I found small joys in the routine of everyday life, helping others, spending time with the few people who had stood by me, and slowly learning how to live for myself. In the end, I realized that while Claire had been a huge part of my life, she didn't have to be anymore. Her hold on me had slipped away, and with it, so had the anger that had consumed me for so long. The truth was, I had been fighting for my independence, for my ability to finally stand up for myself and say no. I didn't need to destroy Claire to feel good about who I was. I didn't need her in my life anymore, and maybe, just maybe, that was the greatest victory of all. I had no idea how long it would take for things to feel normal again. After the trial, after everything that had happened, I couldn't pretend like I wasn't carrying a lot of emotional baggage. But with time, the weight seemed to lessen, bit by bit. It wasn't about forgetting the past or pretending it never happened. It was more like learning how to live with it, how to carry the lessons it taught me without letting them define me. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually living for myself. One of the first steps in that direction came when I took a vacation, something I had never done before. Sure, I'd taken the occasional weekend trip or a short getaway, but this time it was different. I booked a week at a small cabin by the lake in the mountains. It was secluded, peaceful, everything I needed to recharge. I remember pulling up to the cabin, the road winding around the hills, the trees thick with the fresh scent of pine. When I stepped out of the car, I felt a deep sense of relief wash over me. It was like I was stepping away from all the noise, the drama, the lawsuits, the family tension. I had no expectations. No one was around to judge, to ask questions, to pull me back into their chaos. It was just me, the lake, and the mountains. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to be anyone other than who I was at that moment. The first evening, I sat on the deck sipping a cup of tea as the sun dipped behind the mountains. The world felt so still, so quiet. I could hear the rustling of leaves, the gentle ripple of the water in the distance. As the sky darkened and the stars began to appear, I reflected on everything that had brought me here. The struggles, the fights, the loss, and ultimately, the transformation. I thought about Claire again, not with the anger or the hurt that I had once felt, but with a sense of understanding, maybe. She had her own battles, and I had mine. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. Our paths had intersected in ways that would forever change both of us, but I no longer needed to hold on to the past. The next few days were about simplicity, taking long walks by the water, reading books on the porch, and even trying my hand at fishing, which turned out to be much harder than it looked. I didn't catch anything, but I didn't mind. On the third morning, I woke up early, the sunlight spilling into the cabin like liquid gold. The world outside was still quiet, and I took a deep breath as I looked out at the lake, the mist slowly lifting. I felt lighter. That was the moment when I realized that I was truly letting go. Not just of Claire, but of the life that had bound me to a past I couldn't change. I didn't need her validation anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. I had already done the hardest part, standing up for myself, finding my strength. When I returned home, I noticed a change in me. It wasn't just the physical rest or the time spent in nature. It was the mental clarity I had found. I had made peace with the idea that Claire and I would never be what we once were, and that was okay. My relationship with my parents had also shifted. They had finally begun to see things from my perspective, though it wasn't without its bumps. They were still holding on to the idea of family, of unity, but they were slowly starting to accept that I wasn't the same person I had been when I was trapped in Claire's shadow. "I'm proud of you, Jane," my dad said one evening when we were having dinner together. "You've really come a long way." His words meant more to me than I could express. It was a simple acknowledgement, but it was everything. The final step in my healing came when I decided to take on a new project at work. It wasn't something huge, but it was something I had always wanted to do: mentoring. I began helping new technicians learn the ropes, sharing the knowledge I had accumulated over the years. It felt good to be giving back, to be part of something that wasn't tied to any of the past drama. I spent time with these new people, helping them grow, and it was like rediscovering a part of myself I had forgotten. My work no longer felt like a burden, it felt like a calling. And I could see the shift in my coworkers too, as they began to appreciate not just my technical skills, but the confidence I exuded. For the first time in a long time, I felt valued. Not because of some family drama, but because of who I was and what I had to offer. It had taken time, but I was finally in a place where I could look at my past and see the lessons it held without the bitterness, without the pain. I had learned what it meant to stand up for myself, to demand respect, to take control of my own narrative. And most importantly, I had learned that sometimes revenge wasn't the answer. Sometimes peace was. One quiet afternoon, as I sat at my desk working through a routine report, I noticed an email from Claire pop up in my inbox. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't panic. It wasn't an apology or another plea for forgiveness. Instead, it was a simple message. "I'm starting over, Jane. I hope one day you can understand." I stared at the screen for a moment, feeling the last of the tension in my chest finally release. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel the need to reply. I just closed the email and moved on with my day. The past was the past, and I had my life to live. For the first time in my life, I was no longer fighting to prove anything to anyone. I had taken back my power, reclaimed my space, and learned that peace came from within, not from trying to change the people around me. And as I walked out of work one evening, the sky painted in the rich hues of sunset, I realized that I was exactly where I needed to be. Before I leave you here, I want to ask, what does peace look like for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Now, thank you for being a part of this one.